Hello, it's March the 3rd and it's around 5:30, and I decided that it's probably time to go ahead and do our the 6th or 7th or 8th video clip for this week. Before I do that, let me one more time take this opportunity to remind everyone, just in case some of you are not really reviewing the syllabus often enough, that in 2 weeks' time, in a little bit less than 2 weeks' time to be precise, on the 17th of this month, at 10 o'clock in the morning, there will be a set of questions that will become available to you on Blackboard. You will open the questions and you answer them within 2 hours. Send back the answers by 12 o'clock. And I will give you a specific Gmail address to send them to. So I just want to take the opportunity right now to remind you that we will have an exam on the 17th. You have 2 hours to send them back, and you must send them back to the Gmail address. If they're not sent to the Gmail address, and if they are sent back after 12 o'clock, then I will not read them and I will not grade them. And since we're talking about grades, let me again, for the umpteenth time, take this opportunity to remind many of you, obviously not all of you, that some have chosen either to not take part in the blog activity and thus lose that proportion of the final grade, or are just postponing it for one reason or another. You cannot postpone it. You have to answer and write remarks to the issues that are raised on the blog on a weekly basis. If you do not do that, then you are definitely running the risk of really losing that proportion of the grade that is assigned when it comes to your final averages. Now, before we run out of time totally, since our time is limited to only around, I think, 12-15 minutes per clip, I want to say a few words about the problem of waste, because the assignment for this week is the chapter about waste. Now, the single most important thing in my mind when it comes to the issue of waste that needs to be addressed, and that is unfortunately not emphasized or not even spoken about directly in the chapter, is that any environment that does not have humans, that is not dominated by humans, is normally an environment that doesn't have waste. Which implies, as you can see, that waste is a direct product of human activities, and in particular of modernity. So therefore, it is our duty to do whatever we can to reduce, therefore, the amount of waste that is being produced. Now, how can we reduce the amount of waste that's being produced if we're going to go ahead and maintain our lavish lifestyle, and if we're going to continue consuming whatever we're consuming, and if we continue to be affected by Madison Avenue and all of these advertising campaigns? So the issue is, do we consume too much? It's an issue that has been raised by a number of philosophers who are interested in environmentalism. One of them goes by the name of Sagoff. Now, Sagoff has even written an article under the title, "Do we consume too much?" I happen to think that yes, we do consume too much. Actually, it isn't that I think, I know from my own personal experience that we do consume too much. I do consume too much. How do I know that we consume too much? Well, I think there's a very simple metric. Whenever we consume, whenever consumption becomes an end and is no longer a means towards an end, then consumption has become really excessive. If I'm consuming as a means to survival, as a means to attaining a particular end, then that can be justified. But when consumption becomes an end in itself, and I would like to argue, obviously, like many of you probably believe that in a modern world such as ours, our consumption, we consume nothing else but toys. Whether it be cars, whether it be homes, whether it be the electronic gadgets that we use, and so on and so forth. We spend so much time on buying new things that we really don't want. I mean, let's take for a very simple matter one of the tablet computers. You'd think, or you might argue, that the tablet computer actually is not such a bad thing, because it will allow you to communicate with people, it will allow you to be always in touch with libraries all over the world, it will allow you to do your research and so on and so forth, and probably that is true. However, did you ever stop to think about how much waste was created when that particular tablet computer was produced? Now, very roughly, the current estimate is that for every single pound of electronic waste, it takes around 25 tons of raw materials to produce that gadgetry. So I imagine it would be relatively safe to assume that most laptops and most tablet computers, and for that matter probably a couple of iPods or an iPhone plus an iPod, will have so much electronic gadgets in them that they would require around 25 tons of raw material. Now, 25 tons of raw material is what it will take to fill probably a relatively large dump truck. So whenever, therefore, you go ahead and you use a laptop or a tablet computer, what you really should keep in mind is that in order to produce that particular gadget, then 25 tons, actually at one time it used to be 50 tons around 10 years ago, of waste material has been created, or at least 25 tons of matter had to go through a process in order to produce that particular material. Now, in general, therefore, what do we have to do? I would imagine that we should again stress one thing that is not stressed in your chapter, and that is to try and create a production process for practically every single gadget and every single commodity that we know of that mimics nature. So nature mimicry has become right now really the operative word. Because if we mimic nature, what that implies is that we would be creating a production process that does not create as much waste and pollution. And so therefore, we wouldn't have to worry and spend so much time about avoiding the damage that accrues as a result of all these garbage heaps that we are producing. So nature mimicry is extremely important. And we have done it, by the way, in a couple of processes. And it does make a difference. Is it an ultimate solution? Of course not. But at least it's a major step in that direction. And it is so much better than to just produce and then worry about what is it that we have to do in order to reduce the pollution that results from that particular level of production. So whenever we speak about waste, what else do we speak about? We speak really normally about the 3 R's, right? To reuse, to reduce, and to recycle. When was the last time that you heard much about either the reuse or the reduce? You hear quite a lot about the recycling. And there is a reason for that, I believe. The recycling is relatively profitable, or at least it can be made to be profitable. So many of the corporations, the business world, would not object to having a recycling program. But most of them would object, and would object rather seriously, to the effort of reducing and reusing. Because our business as usual setup requires that we consume more and more in order to produce more and more profit. So recycling is in effect part and parcel of that particular process, so we do not object to it that much. So ultimately, I guess what we're saying, the best thing will be really to cut down on our consumption and to change the processes of production in such a way as to produce a particular process that mimics nature as much as possible, so that we will avoid the production of many of these wasteful products. Now, the other few important words that probably we should add, if we have the time, since I believe we might still have the time, is to say that in general, the municipal solid waste that most of us are always concerned about are really never that much of an issue, because something like over 90% of the waste is really industrial waste. So we've got to worry about municipal waste products, solid waste, but we've got to worry also and pay that much greater attention to the reduction really of industrial waste, and in particular of hazardous wastes. And definitely the issue of e-waste, which didn't exist, at least not at the scale that it exists right now, something like 10 or 20 years ago, is really a hugely important issue, because very many of the items that are required for the production are really toxic material, and they do have quite a lot of heavy metals and earth metals that are involved in them. So let me leave you right now with this and talk to you again sometime very soon. Bye-bye.